Estimators for 30, 35 years. We have a main office here in Kansas City. We have a couple other locations as well, mostly in the central Midwest here. I'll let Kevin here introduce himself here as well.
I'm Kevin Edgerton, and I've been with bankers about 30 years, and pretty much for the last probably 25 of that or so has been just focusing on estimating contractors and reporting and things of that nature. So there's a lot of different types of specialties and things of that nature that people do. So that's kind of where I just kind of once they sell the software and things like that, I usually come in and figure out how to implement it and how we can come up with a plan to get the software functioning for us and things of that nature.
All right, so with that, we'll get into a presentation. You know that competition is stiff these days, right? So we were asked to talk about advanced estimating technology and tools today. And we're a big proponent of technology and advancements and so forth. What we're going to show today is our Sage Estimating, formerly called Timberline product, with a product called the Takeoff Tool. We're not going to do so much as an overview of the product. The product does go into BIM, things like that. There's a lot of BIM, cloud technology these days as well. But what we're really going to get into today is tools that people don't often think of that really get into the meat of estimating and really provide the substance behind it. You can do cloud, you can do unit prices, you can do quick takeoffs and so forth, but if you don't have a great spreadsheet tool beyond Excel with a database behind it, you're really missing out. And I don't know how many of you guys today are using Excel. Which will show of hands. Everybody on Excel today? Okay. And who's all using a dedicated estimating tool? Okay. Good. So what we're really going to talk about in this particular Sage product is a couple of tools. One of them is called models for conceptual estimating, not to be confused with BIM models. These are a set of interview questions that we're going to show you that basically spit out a conceptual budget estimate in a matter of a minute or so. Very, very quick tool because you guys aren't getting paid to do estimates, aren't getting paid to do budgets. I'm sure a lot of you guys are doing a lot of that in work that you do every day. And if there was a way to cut that in half or even more, this tool is it. Also, we're going to talk about handling alternates. And then unlocking interactive dashboards using Microsoft Power BI, which is really going to be the most sort of flashy, techy tool we're going to show you here today. Really, really simple and very powerful visual tool you can use. So with that, I'm going to get out of this, and I'll get into our estimating tool here. So if are any of you guys Sage Timberline uses here? Okay. Are you familiar with models at all? Okay. So there's a couple of versions of the Sage program, but there's a module in it called Models. Again, it's not a BIM model, it's an interview model. So when I go into Takeoff here, and by the way, just for those of you that aren't familiar with this tool, it works with a database behind it, pull your master format, unit format, assemblies, items, things like that. These models pull from that database. So you're getting all of the robust item and assembly information in this interview model here. So I'm going to go into it. Models here, they can be built as granular or as conceptual as you need them. So you can do everything from, let's just say, an entire building shell to just like a roof structure or an interior build out. So kind of the sky's the limit on what you want to, how you want to create your models. So
the biggest thing with models to kind of keep in mind is Justine's just kind of going through them a little bit, is there's some models that can be set up for, especially if somebody does a lot of very detailed monotonous takeoff. So if I do footings for a wastewater treatment plant, where I say, footing 1, what is it? Footing 2, what is it? Footing 3, what is it? A model is kind of cool because it can actually re-emulate something where it can just ask you for like whatever coding or sorting you're doing, and then automatically take off some group of items, or automatically, ask you the questions needed for, footing length, width, depth, rebar configuration, things like that. And then the other aspect that models are very powerful for, which is kind of more of where Justin's going to go right now, is more on the conceptual side, where I'm doing that cocktail napkin estimate, something of that nature, where I only know, 15 questions or something of that nature, or 50 questions where maybe the drawings have been drawn, maybe they haven't, but it goes through the same logic as far as the detail that's going to generate behind the scenes, because once it generates the content, it's going to have that's a 4-inch slab that we assumed, or that was this size of footing that we assumed, so that way there's good backing of what your assumptions were. So,
You guys see that okay? Almost right. So with a part of like stage estimating, Bill 4 estimating is going to audit everything that you do. So you'll see at the top I have a date and a timestamp. So everything that I'm putting in, everything that I'm taking out, it audits everything for me. So that I can go back and review it later. You know, somebody may need you to check a number, something might be off, you might not need to see what happened when, you can go back and review that at a later date. These models, you can put in photo examples, drawing examples of just exactly what you're taking off. Like Kevin mentioned, you can make assumptions about what you're building, so assuming you always have a 4-inch or 6-inch slab, things like that. You don't have to do assumptions in it. But these are really just a series of general questions. These are just typing in answers, but you can also do drop-down type questions, check boxes as well. Just like the Sage Estimating database, these are built with a series of hints inside them. So again, you're standardizing your estimating team, making sure people are putting the right stuff in, they're not leaving things out. That's what these yellow boxed hints you're going to see as I go through this are for. So I can select my building type. We'll just say we're going to do commercial office, and just put a general, building square footage in there. And these models, by the way, can be built so that some of the items are pre-filled. So down below, I've pre-filled my foundation specs just because I typically build foundations for this type of project in the same way or similar way. You can still modify those at any time though as well. But these, each building has their own unique specs, so I'm just going to go in and put random numbers here, but just to give you an idea of really quickly how we can do this. So, and by the way, they're smart. So if you've ever used assemblies and Sage Estimating, for those of you who use the product, the models are also built smart. So every answer you put in, it knows what to ask you next, just like an assembly would in assembly estimating. So based on my input there, the type of exterior wall construction I put in, it's now going to ask me, well, does it have a structural steel frame on the building? And so I can go through then and answer that question, the type of roof and so forth. These checkboxes are kind of tiny, but are they gable roof ends? Does it have multiple exterior finishes? Again, yes it does, so it asks me more questions about that. No it doesn't, let's continue on with our day. What's the siding finish? Does it have plaster spots? We'll leave it blank, but you'll get the idea. You can break it into sections if you want. General building specs, foundations, we've pre-filled some of this stuff already. Exterior and window specs. It can be as detailed or as simple as you want them to be. General conditions, yeah, let's generally say it's a 15-month build for this type of project. The rest of the stuff below is just all pertaining to your database, your items and assembly that are included in this model. So you don't really have to pay attention to this stuff. You can go in if you want, change some things here and there, but otherwise I'm saying, okay, close this down. Toggle over my estimate here, green light, let's go. Again, that date and timestamp, you see that audit, we're going to generate our model. It's complete. So I'll close these windows down, and now you'll see, and I can view my information in multiple ways in Sage Estimating here as well. So you can see, you can look at it by phase item, takeoff order, assembly. There's some other ways to view my information I don't have open here as well. Really, the sky's the limit on how you want to view your data, organize your spreadsheet. So if I look at it by assembly, for instance, it's just spit out all of this detailed assembly information based on those few inputs. And from this point, I can then go in and change any, if I need to change any pricing and quantities, I can do that manually in the spreadsheet if I want to. I have colored my spreadsheet as well, just for my own kind of visual purposes, but the spreadsheet, just like Excel, you can manipulate it any way you want. I'll go in here and collapse some of this stuff here to make it a little bit more easier to see. So you can see things by division here, the breakdowns, high-level information, and so forth. So really pretty quick and easy to make conceptual budgets. I don't know how many hours you guys spend doing those today. I know sometimes people spend hours, if not days, on a conceptual estimate. If you have these models pre-built here, you can generate them rather quickly. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, and he's going to start talking about alternates.
So one thing I kind of mentioned at this screen here even, so these are all actually assemblies that was generated. So if I were to actually right here click on one of these assemblies and go to review, that would actually show me all the assumptions that were put behind the scenes that Justine didn't even have to fill out. So that's one of the concepts behind conceptual is, yes, it's conceptual, yes, I don't know much at this point in time possibly, but all the foundation of all these quantities are very detailed as far as how it came up with them. So that way, once drawings are drawn or something of that nature, if someone looks at the slab and says, oh, well, I was assuming that it was 3,000, and now that we've got something drawn up, I figured out that now you're 3,500 PSI concrete, or you know, you go to another, you know, you can't do wire mesh, you got to move to rebar because of the structure you're doing. You know, I can change those, and all those numbers regenerate as I know more information. So those models are very powerful to maybe start conceptual, but then head towards, you know, once drawings are drawn up, revamping some of those questions as I go through there. When you put estimates together currently, how many times do you build all base bid in one, you know, spreadsheet and alternates in other spreadsheets and things of that nature? There's quite a few people build them in separate files, or you actually do it, incorporate them all in one. Kind of a combination. You're all in one because you're using a system anyway, it sounded like, and so forth. So when you think about it, there's a lot of people that actually would build one spreadsheet for a base bid, one spreadsheet for an alternate. And theoretically, I've got the clients out there that are using the estimate to do the same thing. They create two spreadsheets, and one's for one piece and one's for another. What's the drawback with being two separate files? Any guesses? Inconsistency. Exactly. So it's very common that I can sit there and say, oh, that 3,500 PSI concrete's $100 a yard over here, but this other estimate's still whatever it was. So one of your advantages to really try to tie a lot of that in one estimate is that gives you the ability in an actual estimating system that you can go in and say, okay, this is changing to $115 a yard, and it could ask me a question of, do you want to do the other items, duplicate items, and say yes, and maybe it could update multiple pieces at the same time. So what I'm going to take a look at here is I'm just going to kind of show how to set up an alternate with the actual Sage estimating product here, and kind of what that might look like to actually see some separation, but yet still be able to get multiple totals out and things of that nature. So I'm just going to start off with the new estimate here. Give it some sort of name. It's then going to come out with a cover page and so forth. So I'm not going to worry about any of the cover page at this point in time. So that way, at this point, I've just got a plain spreadsheet to get me started. If I take a look at advanced, since I started this completely from scratch and I didn't use a template estimate or anything like that, I'm going to have to do a couple little setup things here to get me started. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up something called statuses. So in the most basic sense of an alternate, it's either included in the base bid or it's not. That's the most simplistic in my mind, in or out. In the more advanced ones, where maybe somebody takes this estimate and they're using it through the life cycle of an estimate, my statuses might be something like, okay, we've got a rejection on this, that they rejected it, or maybe I've got a signed contract on this, maybe I've got a verbal okay on it, but we haven't approved it yet. So these statuses could be multiple things. In this case, I'm going to just try to keep it simple here with just the include or exclude. So the next thing I need to do is I need to set the structure of what's the different things that I'm going to price out and so forth. So one thing about this to keep in the back of your mind is there is an option over here to import and export. So one of the advantages to import is the ability of, some of the clients I work with, they say, well, shoot, this prospect gives me a list of all the different things that they want me to solicit numbers by, so maybe I can just import those quantity or those descriptions in, so I don't have to sit there and do all the typing of all the descriptions they want or something of that nature. In this case, I'm going to keep it real simple, so I'm just going to add a few. So maybe I've got my base bid. It's not my specialty. So maybe that's going to be my ultimate to get me started. So in this case, I'm going to say that I want that included in my total at the moment, and these two I'm going to basically call excluded. So at this point, I want to start doing some takeoff and get things built in my spreadsheet, and I'm going to go through and put the items in a little bit slower than the model did. so that way we can kind of see a little bit more of it take shape and get these items in the spreadsheet. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this default values, and this default values lets me kind of label what you're working on. So one of the critical things with computerized estimating systems is the ability to, I'm not limited to however I build it. So when you think about Excel spreadsheets and things of that nature, a lot of time, however you build that spreadsheet is what you're going to look at it. Because once you start trying to sort or group or total something different, all my formulas start to get messed up and things of that nature. So one of the abilities here is I can put in different things like sort codes to actually sort data differently. Why do I need to sort data differently? Well, the most basic one is what we just talked about, base bid and alternates. Almost everybody has them. Other reasons why people have to sort and estimate is presentation games. So there's some clients that I work with that say, well, wait a second, we're still on the old CSI format where we're using 1 through 16, but these clients here want to see the estimate in the divisions, 1 through 48. Or maybe a lot of clients that are going to BIM, it seems like uniformat's becoming more popular with, substructure, super substructure, things of that nature with a completely different labeling system. So you can actually build a database that can actually have all three of those information. So as soon as you grab one item like food and concrete, maybe it knows that that's division 3 in both the old and the new format. Maybe it knows that it's something like A10 in uniformat, so that way I can now take that one estimate and look at it in different orders for different presentations, different clients we work with, things of that nature. In my case, there's those different choices that I just set up a moment ago. So I'm going to say I want to look at the base. So anything I throw in the estimate right now is going to be associated with the base bid. The first type of takeoff I'm going to hit is actually a one-time item. A one-time item is basically just saying that this message is going to tell me that it's going to show me all the detail in my estimate right now, whether it's included or excluded, it doesn't care, it's going to show me everything, so that way we can see it. So a one-time item is basically saying it's not in the database, don't want to mess around putting it in the database. So there's a lot of prospects that we work with that I can't sell you a database because, like we talked earlier about sprinklers, I don't necessarily have a good database that I can just say, hey, here's your miracle go for it type thing. So what we usually end up doing is we have to work with things like Excel spreadsheets, copy and pasting things into this database so that way I can get some of these products to match up with what the clients are doing. There's other clients that will sit down and just do one-time items and then have it save that back to the database to develop out what content they need. So in this case, I'm just going to say that I want to throw some doors in here. What database? Oh, I'm not going to do this. What is that? Well, let's see what you got up there. That's got some other different views, that's fine. I'm using it this one. Okay, so I'm going to say one-time item. I'm going to pull up the list. So part of my list has something called phases. So that's just a matter of how you want to group your content and so forth. So for these doors, I'm just going to pick doors. I'm going to just pick a heading called doors and frames. And I can say whatever I want for description. So I'm going to say a 3070 door. Your keyboard don't work either. Oh, check that one. And let's say we've got 20 of them, let's say each. And I'm going to say it's like material associated with it. So, nothing magical, very tedious at typing content, but the cool thing about it is I can almost go into anybody's office and we can start doing estimating because as long as I teach it what I want, that can then be saved back to the database and used on the next one and things of that nature. If I take a look at this for a moment then, here was that 20 doors. Maybe I can come over here and say that I'm going to put a price in here of, let's say, $40. Per man-hour. So if I take it off in one unit of measure and price it something different, and I can go in there and say, hey, it's $100 a door for labor to install it and be done. But one of the things about an estimating system that's pretty powerful is being able to estimate as much as possible with productivities and time, so that way I can do field reports and other information that I can give out to people running the job, start tracking this by different cost codes so we can track it in our accounting systems and so forth. So in this case, I'm going to say that they can do a half a door per hour. So in that case there, it's going to go ahead and calculate me 40 hours. At $40 an hour is going to come out $1,600. Now, the thing that's really powerful about a true estimating system is the fashion that when you think about Excel, if I take A1 divided by B1 to come up with a formula for calculating hours, if you go to your number of hours and just changed it, you've just messed up your formula where it's not going to add up again in the future. So that's one of the benefits to a true estimating system is the fashion that I can come down here to the number of hours and I can say, well, they're really going to have to bust it on this, but I'm going to say that I want them to do it in hide those, those aren't the column I want to see. And I'm going to say I want to insert one called labor. So it's got the same 40 hours in here, but this column I can actually change. So I can say, okay, I'm going to put 16 hours in there. So in that case it says, I just went from a half a door per hour that they're now going to have to crank it up and say that they're going to have to do, what did I have in there, like 1.25, so basically a door and a quarter per hour to get it done in those 16 hours. So that's kind of cool because now I can start with the productivity or something as a baseline, but a lot of estimators like to then put the gut feel for, well, shit, that's going to take them a half a day to do that task or whatever the case is. So I'm not really having to conform to, there's a lot of people I see with Excel grab their calculators and back divide or play around with different numbers to get the, number of hours they want and things like that. But in this case here, I can change this back and forth. So I can say, well, I'm going to go down to, what would it look like if I went down to 0.75 doors per hour? Well, that came out to about 27 hours. So it makes it a lot more powerful for the estimator to sit there and play those what-if games and gut feels for, man, this one's going to be a lot more complicated because of this reason, those type of things. So that's kind of a little bit about how the spreadsheet works and some of the advantages it is. So in this case, I'm now going to jump to something called an assembly. So an assembly is a lot like an item, just that it's maybe made up of multiple items. So in this case here, let's see what I can find out here. So let's say concrete detail, and let's just take off a slab or something pretty basic that everyone would understand. This database probably doesn't look very basic. That one does. Good. So in this case here, if you notice, it's got some list of items. It's got some list of questions. So the neat thing about something called an assembly is you basically can teach it what item should it estimate. Each one of those lines can have a calculation associated with it. So then in the top right-hand corner, it can ask you questions to say, okay, how do I come up with this? And this is one of the points that Justine said earlier about like smart assembly, because there's some out there that you could do something similar where you, okay, yeah, here's a list of items, but it's not smart enough to swap the items around. So you always end up calculating the same items back to your spreadsheet, whether you need them or not. So in this example, it's going to be very powerful because one thing like this one probably gets into is it probably gets into different strengths of concrete where I don't want to see 3,000, 35, 4, 4,500 all in my estimate at the same time when I get done. I only want to see the one that I specified when I go through these questions. So in this case here, I'm going to say that this is a 100-foot long by 50-foot wide, 4-foot deep. So when most people start thinking about assemblies, start to think about these questions this is asking. A lot of people, when I first work with them, when we start talking about assemblies, they start getting concerned and they say, well, everything we do is different. It's not always the same setup. So that's where these assemblies are a little bit different because a lot of other products are, again, kind of get into where, okay, it assumes that that wall is made up of 3 and 5/8 metal studs and this size getting of steel and this drywall configuration and things like that. But a good smart assembly can come up and ask me, what are the actual questions? So like in this case here, I'm asking thicknesses, I'm asking strengths, I'm asking you how you're going to place it. So maybe I have to think about, oh, I don't know how I'm going to get it. I'm going to have sub do it, or maybe I'm going to have to, so I'm going to say I'm going to self-perform it in this case. And how are you going to get it there? And I've never thought about that. Am I going to have to rent a crane? So those are things that's really cool about good assemblies is I'm kind of quizzing the estimator. What about this? What about this? Those type of things. So it's amazing how many people I work with when you ask them like, hey, how do you calculate excavation for digging a footing? Oh, length, width, and depth, and they're calculating something like this. But if it's over 4 foot, don't I have to pull the edges off? Do we ever calculate that where it's like, some estimators do, some don't? So that's where this is powerful, because if I hit something that's over 4 foot, maybe it's going to come up with more questions about, are you going to set a trench box? Are you going to slope it off at a 1-to-1? How do I come up with that extra quantity of something that's needed to calculate it? What's my forming options? So let's just say we're going to do the whole perimeter, and I'm just going to go ahead and say that some number, joint construction. Any additives to it? No. So as I go through here, kind of like that model that Justine looked at earlier, if I come up and ask a question, you notice that now it says a second additive. So when I said 0 the first time, it went right on a vapor barrier. But if I come back and say, well, wait a second, no, this is going to be done where I need to put some sort of hot water because it's getting cold and something like that. So now it's going to say, hey, is there another additive? So that way maybe I have multiple ones I need or something of that nature. What vapor barrier?
This is an example of a pretty complex assembly that can get much simpler than this. This kind of gives you the full breadth of how you can build assembly.
So if I go ahead and accept that, then you'll see pretty much all these items was what that assembly just generated. That I didn't really have to sit there and repeat, length, width, and depth, or a bunch of calculations. It was something that we go through and try to automate the calculations. And there again, if my database is set up with productivities, I can see the number of hours, start adjusting all those and things of that nature. So, one client, one of the things I thought was interesting about them that I enjoyed working with that was funny was once he got going, I asked him, it's like, okay, what's the biggest benefit of the system? And he's like, well, the more I thought about it, he's like, that type of math there that I was doing, he says, my 6-year-old boy can do that. He says, now that I got this systems the way I want it, he says, that thing helps me calculate those numbers, those monotonous, consistent numbers. It gives me more times to do the true estimator skill of what productivities are going to be a cakewalk on this job, or which ones are going to be a bust, and I got to go back and adjust, or review, or things like that, or maybe I got more time to get more sub prices to, analyze something, things of that nature, than just doing monotonous, number calculations and so forth. So that was kind of surprising when I worked with them that, most of them tell me speed or accuracy or things like that, and so forth. Does that make a little bit of sense? Questions, anything on that so far? So in this case here, if I take a look at these tabs at the bottom, these tabs at the bottom have to do with how to sort that data. So if I go down through here, I'm going to go to the home. Here's a little one that looks like the tabs at the bottom. That's how I modify those tabs. So I'm going to set, let me double check and make sure you know what we have in home here, which it looks like you do. So I'm going to actually cancel and actually just put farther. That's always a drawback of using someone else's machine some days. So if I take a look at what we generated, is I put the base bid to that one-time item I did. And apparently when I came back and did this item, I forgot to tell it what I was working on. So, darn, mistake. I didn't tell it what I was working on, so all that top stuff says unassigned. This was the base bid where I really wanted all that other content. So when you start talking about grouping things in math, because if I look at this spreadsheet right now, there's my total hours, there's my total dollars, things of that nature for each one of those pieces. If I find that I make a mistake, one of the things that's brilliant about not necessarily using a spreadsheet is I can grab all this content, I can drag and drop it down to that base, it automatically moved all those to the base heading, and now I have all new totals without having to rewrite a single formula. So that can be very powerful for those of you that get into, man, this client wants me to split this off and sort it different ways, or I built this estimate, and then they come back and they want me to sort it by what month the work's going to be done in, or who's paying the bill. Those type of things are very, very powerful when you're working with a true, estimating product. So with that being said, the next thing I want to take a look at is, I don't remember which one was which. So one of my alternates was to add color concrete, so I think that was alternate 1. So I'm going to go ahead and expand this back out here. So I'm going to basically take this concrete line here that I've got. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to tell it to move copy. So move is going to basically, if I wanted to take something out of this heading and move it to something else. So maybe I had something in the base bid and the clients come back to me and said, separate that as a separate number. That's where I might use move. In this example, what I'm going to do is I just want to take that concrete line item and I'm going to put it down into my alternate at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and say I actually want to make a copy because I still need concrete in my base estimate. 2, or excuse me, alternate 1 happens to be my adding my color concrete there. So now what I notice, I see alternate 1 here, and it's got that line in my estimate. So if I come over here to my material price, I might say adding for color concrete, maybe that's going to add, I don't know, $25 a cubic yard, something of that nature. Since I copied that other item, it's going to ask me if I want to change the price of that other one. So in this example, I'm going to say no. Now, if you notice, this is actually a little bit different color-wise than this one. And also, it's a little bit different color-wise than, which I don't have set up at the moment, so I won't say it. So this is a little bit different color than the rest. And the reason why is these are excluded at the moment. That's why they also have a little strike through, because I said they're not in the base bid at the moment. So if I take a look at my total page, this $88,000 at the moment just includes what I've told it to include in my estimate total. Sorry, this is session. I'm not going to put the other alternate in, but keep in mind that I could create one for deduct for the gravel and things like that, and have 2 and so forth, because I want to kind of get into some of the pricing here, or the grouping and things like that a little bit different. So as I look at this, a couple of things going on. Under this advanced tab, there's something called summary. This would actually show me my base bid and all my alternates side by side, and whether or not it's included in that grand total. So the grand total down here always shows me where I'm at in the total, which only includes at the moment my base bid. So in this case here, I've got $88,000 worth of base bid and $19,000 worth of the alternate. Why does the alternate seem so high? Oh, because it has so much concrete. Okay. So no matter how many I had, it would show me where that's at. And as I go through here and play different combinations, I can say, oh, I want this included, and now it's got my $88,000 plus my $19,000 is $107,000, and down here at the bottom it showed me $107,000, and if I were to close this, everything would actually be the same white color. And I could go back and flag, well, maybe I just want to put different alternates together for some reason, so I'm going to temporarily exclude that section. So now when I take a look at this, it's going to say, okay, the only thing I've got included right now is that alternate, so my total is $19,000, and if I go back and actually look at my total page, it's the same $19,000. So that comes in real powerful that I'm not sitting there trying to do multiple spreadsheets and maintain prices in both of them or things like that. That way, I can look at both of them in one and kind of keep them grouped together and things of that nature. Make sense? Questions, comments, thoughts on that? So I think at this point, I'm going to shift it back to Justine, and she's going to show you how to tie in something called Takeoff, where you can actually do image takeoff and pass that information over, with some of that information having alternates associated with it.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on the Takeoff tool. I'm just going to show you the concept of both of them connecting and connecting dynamically. Because the key here really is that everything works off the same database. It's a secure database. Your information is in there, and it works with both systems. So eTakeoff, it can be run standalone, but also connected with Sage Estimating. So I've already got some Takeoff done. I have a 100-page document set in here, straight from PDFs, no converting files. I've already started what's called a bridge. So the bridges your database from Sage Estimating over with your 2D Takeoff here. 2 ways you can send your Takeoff over to the estimate. One is manually. So if you'd like to have a lot of control over seeing what goes in, when, you can just send it over individually. Otherwise, this program is built to automatically take your Takeoff into the Sage Estimating spreadsheet. So, but before I do that real quick, so you'll see when I hit it in automatic, it now found all of these slabs on grades, a bunch of brick, flooring, things like that I've already got done on my estimate in my project here in the Takeoff tool. But before I go over there, I do want to point out the work breakdown structures as Kevin went through. If I click on some of this Takeoff here, you'll now see I've got the same work breakdown structures that are in Sage Estimating. And just in the same way that he identified items in the base bid before he began Takeoff, you can identify who estimated it, what phase of the project it's in, things like that, room, really whatever you want to describe here in work breakdown structures, and we'll transfer all of this over straight to the estimating spreadsheet. So I'll bridge here, automatic mode, the screen arrow, right here, submits my assignments over to my estimating spreadsheet. So with that, we're gonna go ahead and send 96 takeoff items over. These are both items and assemblies. Again, it matches your Sage Estimating database, so all of the same information. Successfully added, so I'm gonna close this down here and let's go over to our estimate. So I'm gonna it's gonna open up my new home away hotel estimate for this new project. I'll close down my totals here, but just like that, again, how fast was that? Just, I did all my takeoff, hit one button, and it sent everything over right into my spreadsheet. No having to transfer data separately from one to the other. It's all together dynamically in this estimate. So I'll pop over to assembly again, collapse it up here. Notice when I expand this in the takeoff quantity, we have some blue ticks here. That tells me it came from e-takeoff. So at this point, I actually have the ability to go back and drill down to e-takeoff and review the items here. So I could go take a look at that. It's gonna open up the bridge for me, show me what I'm reviewing, these curves of concrete gutter. And then it's gonna also highlight it in my drawing here. So at this point, I have the ability to now edit these lines and resend it over to the estimate. But back to the estimating tool, I'm gonna go ahead and, oops, shut this down real quick. So I'm gonna go back into this estimate, and I'll go and go look at my alternates here. So I have one of them open. So you'll see I had that base bid identified before in my takeoff, and I have other alternates identified. It already automatically took these over. I don't have to reorganize it at this point. It's already done for me. So once and done. So that's just another quick tool, tips and tricks here of how the two products work together. Any questions otherwise on any of the alternates and how some of this e-takeoff and stuff like that works?
On the alternates, is there a way to make them mutually exclusive?
Mutually exclusive as far as,
So if they're going to take one alternate, it's going to discount that they can take one of the other alternates.
basically, as long as I separate each alternate out, I can come back and just turn one or the other on. It wouldn't necessarily affect the dollars associated with, if there's a discount to doing them both or something like that, we probably have to come up with some add-on or something to know whether both of them are in the estimate or not. So like if I did an advantage of, hey, if you take alternate 1 and 2, I got 2% off or something like that, we probably have to do some sort of add-on at the bottom of our total page there to do that. There'd probably be a manual, something we'd have to take out if somebody elected only one of the alternates or something.
When you're doing your assembly, your takeoff, is that incorporated into your assembly then?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
you can just tell it, I'm doing a footing takeoff and it's going to add everything to it.
Yep. So if I click on like this parking lot, for instance, it's tied to that same Sage Estimating assembly that's in my Sage database. And this has a tool, so you already use Sage Estimating. If you had any takeoff, it has a utility that would actually build your traces, the colors here are called traces. It would build that for you based on your database in Sage Estimating. So you're not even having to build this library, it'll auto build it for you. So the quantity list to the right here, you see in here, that is the same variables and so forth that I'm working with in my Sage Estimating database when I do like assembly takeoff in Sage. So I can change at this point, paving thickness, specs for the asphalt X and so forth.
That's something that I just recently, it's really makes it a lot easier for clients to get up to speed, because that way you basically, they've got a little migrator tool where you open up your estimating database and say, okay, I want all my items to go over, or I just want these items to go over, I want these estimates to go over, and then they show up on that left-hand side for traces. So if I sit down with that project for the first time, I'd see my assemblies and or items on that left-hand pane where it says traces, so I can say, okay, here's this footing, then I go trace it out, and that's how it knows the relationship with what it's going to send back for the estimate then.
Just since we have a little bit of, go
Is
ahead.
it creating new passes? So if you change something in here that's connected to an assembly, it goes back, erases that original pass and
Yep.
substitutes it.
can even rename like an assembly if you want to say revision 1, or you can rename things too that'll transfer, put notes on things that'll transfer straight to the estimating spreadsheet. And just since we're in here, if any of you do use Takeoff, there is a new tool in it now called Work Zones. So if you ever do phase projects or need to split out your Takeoff, you can actually use this new Work Zones tool to split your project. You can do a rectangular polygon type of a zone, but I could go north side, south side type of thing, right? Just to show you, but I'm just clicking the area that I want to do my work zone in. It's now named it here, given it a color. I can change the color and so forth here as well. But now it'll actually break my Takeoff down into zones. So if I have a split job, I can then identify what's in what part of the project and so forth this way without having to kind of do it once and then do it again. So then it has like a report here. So now you'll see I've now got all of that and these quantities associated with that work zone on the north side here. Any questions on this tool in general?
You curve areas of curb cut. I mean,
Curve linear areas?
yeah.
Yeah, so this actually, so this product works with quick keys. I don't know if you use any products with quick keys, but it does make your life easier. I was an architect for a while, so I'm totally used to CAD quick keys. This tool actually has, if I was taking out this pool area for instance, so the curves here, if you hit the C key as you're going along, and I'll show you here, it'll actually read the curves exactly, so you don't have to worry about being precise on the curves. One of the next releases this year, this tool is actually going to have what's called a snap tool in it. We'll give you the option, if your designers are drawing polylines with smart lines, it will read those smart lines, which are also called vector lines. PDFs create, when PDFs created, it creates like a vector PDF drawing. So what happens is the snap tool, you can turn it on or turn it off, but you actually would click in the center of this room, say, and it would grab the whole perimeter and do the square footage, right, rather than having to click every corner, every point, right? So a lot of new advances coming out with this tool, but right now, if I were to show you this real quick. This is how we create quick trace if you wanted to create one. You can go in and just make changes, things like that, to the way it looks. And you can also build your library. So it'll not only have your library for your stage estimate, but if you're doing a one-time item or a quick add, you can quickly add. And also, if you want to keep it in your library, you can just say, save as a standard trace here. And I can up the transparency, so if that looks a little bit darker there in my preview window. But if I want to go in and just take off, just for these intensive purposes today, we're not going to put epoxy really in this pool, but to show you, I'm just doing a 3-point arc here. Oops, I gotta go in the other direction here, but I'm just doing a 3-point arc, and then I'm hitting my C key, and then it reads that curve. So I can just go along, and there's a polar mode as well, so you can make sure your lines are straight and all that too. If there are any other questions on this part,
So
yeah.
if you trace something like that, can you then relate it back to or create an assembly off of it from what you just did?
You can, yes. You can, Takeoff calls assemblies as extensions, basically. So this is a very simple, so you'll see in my quantity list here to the right, I've just got a perimeter and an area. That's basically what I did. So I created an area takeoff, area trace. You count length perimeter as your base. But then if you went in on the back side of this thing, you could.
Basically, I just go to your bridge, open up your simulate, and just tie that to it.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to mess around setting up the extensions ahead of time or anything like that. You can just open up that, drop it right on your.
If you had a one-time item created already, like
No, you don't. But if the assemblies are already created, you just open up your assembly bridge, and you can tie that line right to it.
Can you delete areas out of those that take off that?
yes, you can. So it works in a clockwise, counterclockwise fashion. So add is clockwise, subtract is counterclockwise. So
That was the reason why initially when she started going counterclockwise, she said.
So I'm saying if you're taking something out of the center of that data.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can just connect the points here, and I can just start.
The trick is just to do it counterclockwise, so it knows what you're adding, and subtracting that.
Okay.
And this tool too, so I might have epoxy board coating in another area. Another way to organize your takeoff here is, again, quick keys, hitting the D key here will allow me to break this down in a pool area. I can go in and do like an exercise room in here, I can break it down. So my measurement summary over to the right will kind of start breaking that stuff down in another way for me. So you'll see now I've got my epoxy floor coating, and I now have a pool area underneath it with its quantity associated. So then I can go about doing, more takeoff and again breaking it down. Let's, do this exercise room for instance, and I need to grab the floor there. And once I do that, I've got my exercise room added to that list as well. Anything else? So Kevin is going to move into Microsoft Power BI and how you can use that tool. Microsoft Power BI, if you haven't used it before, it is a free tool that you can use to data mine your stage estimating estimates. So it's based on the fact that you have a set of estimates already built up that you can then use to inform future project budgets, get key performance indicators on your project picks and things like that. And I'll let Kevin kind of talk through some of that here.
One thing before I go down that trail that I forgot to mention over here was, if you look at that estimate that I built, and I'm going to go ahead and just that color is driving me crazy on that picture up on the screen. Something that I changed. Good, I'm going to need to. Have you ever left a hole in an estimate? Something you forgot to, I don't know, get that price in here. So if you think about that door that I did with that one-time item, I put some labor money in there, but that material money is waiting to bite me in the rear because I never did fill that material money for that door in. So the other thing about the estimate I wanted to hit on before I jump to the Power BI and so forth was when you're looking at true estimating type of systems, some of them have something called scan, where if I sit there and click on this button, if you notice right now, it's just talking between those two cells. That's the only two issues I have in this estimate right now. Everything else is filled out. But if I had any, I don't know, let's go back up here. Let's say for some reason I didn't put a quantity for that item, or maybe I had some other item that maybe I didn't put, maybe I didn't put this price per in there. So let's say I don't have the price there. So now as I sit there and scan the estimate for holes, it's going to say, hey, you don't have money there, you don't have money there, you forgot to put a quantity in there, you didn't tell me what the material price for that was, you didn't tell me the labor price for that line. So it's an excellent proof checker before I go out and give out a bid or something of that nature to try to spot check, if I get, it's got all the buckets filled out.
Is there any way to color coding those numbers so if you throw in a plug number that you can
Sure, find these or
the
something like
plug
that.
number later?
So as far as today goes, anything I change with fonts seems to affect almost everything. So I can't necessarily highlight that line. One of the things that is what I usually recommend is, because our sort criteria is so powerful, I might go into my database and set up, and I'm not really adding to the database. When I look at WBS, I can change WBS codes for this estimate. So I'm going to go ahead and set one up called Review. So what that now allows me to do is I can actually come back into this estimate, right-click somewhere and say insert another column, and I want to insert that column that I just built called Review. So I can't color code it, but what's actually faster than color coding is if I were to flag what items I'd really like to come back to at some point in time, now I could have a tab at the bottom that would say, there's all those items, top dog that I just can focus on without having to scroll through the spreadsheet to find it. So if I go back to my home tab, sequences, hit add, so I can set up another one that's going to coincidentally use a field called review. And then maybe I'll sort it by group for a second. So that way, at a very quick glance, I can tell those are all the ones I still have to review. So like if you think about bid day, one of the clients I work with, they basically throw, I don't remember what exactly they do. They do something with numbers. Here's the things that I don't have any money in for yet. Here's the things that I've got money in that I need to go back and review. Here's the ones that I've got money in there that I feel somewhat comfortable, but not very. Or here's the ones that, no, I'm pretty good with those. So they've got some scheme they like to use where they just use different, I don't remember if it's letters or numbers or something, so they can group it out. Because basically, if I come in there and put in some other codes, it's pretty quick to sit there and keep separate sections, separate groups for whatever reason. Come back in here and have review. Then you can drag columns around, you can right click on them and rename them, stuff, you can name them what you want. So that way, if I wanted to go ahead and say, okay, well, that's something else I want to keep track of, maybe a little bit different, or maybe this one here I feel good about now, so I can take that little code off. So it's just a matter of kind of sorting it at that point. It's probably the easiest way I can see people doing it, I think. Okay, so Power BI. Who's heard of Microsoft Power BI? Anyone ever hear of it? So, I didn't either until a very, very short time ago. And one of our clients is actually here at the show today. Actually was one of them that kind of got me tipped off in it. It said they were doing some neat things, trying to group data and things like that. So one of the neat things about Microsoft Power BI is the fashion of, it's not really this product or that product's data. So BI is basically something where you can actually go out and tie, hey, I want to go take our estimating data and pull some stuff, or maybe I want to pull some stuff out of accounting, or maybe I want to pull this out. So it's basically just a Microsoft product that as long as it has some connection through either ODBC, SQL Server databases, whatever, you can pull the data into it. So I'm not going to get into much training on it. I'm just going to kind of, throw out the idea of, some of the vision that a couple of clients have brought to my attention that's really kind of cool, because in the past, our product at least used to do estimates like Excel. Every estimate was a separate file. So if I had 4 estimates, each one was a separate file. One of the things that's drastically changed in our environment over the last few years is Sage has moved their estimating to a SQL database, SQL Server database, which now means that all my estimates are technically in one table. So that now allows me to go back through those estimates and data mine data out of all these estimates. So in this example here, all the estimates I've got on my system at the moment, I've got a little flag of whether they should show up on this or not. Because there are some people that tell me things like, shoot, we have to do 10 estimates before a client will sign off on the deal. I don't want all 10 of those estimates to show up on my yearly summary. I just want to see this one as our final version or something of that nature. So I've got one flag in this thing where I can tell it whether an estimate should show up on here or not. From there, the other thing I've got is what's the status of the estimate. So in this example, all I've got filtered is just what have we been awarded. So if you think about at a quick glance, if I can tell we've been awarded since, looks like my data starts at about 2014, we've been awarded about $120,000 at the moment. And the thing that makes this BI so powerful is those are almost as easy as insert. They're actually easier than inserting a chart in Excel. That basically all we end up doing when we put things there is they've got a symbols chart on the right-hand side where you grab a chart, you drop it over, you grab fields, drop on it, and it figures out the relationship between them and usually does a pretty good starting point of setting up what that looks like. So in this case here, I've got account. So of that $120,000, it comes out to about almost 100 estimates. The minimum estimate has been, the average estimate is, the maximum estimate has been over that period of time, things like that. So then this chart kind of goes through and it breaks it out by year. by different estimators. So that way I can tell, of course, I'm going to put more fictitious data in there for myself instead of anyone else. So, you know, most of the years I've done more awarded estimates than anyone else that I've got listed out here. Here it is by project types. So there again, at a glance, I can tell, well, grocery stores, you know, has been a very small, maybe we had a little bit more that year. As I hover over any of those, it will actually show me what that dollar amount is for that particular, you know, whatever I'm hovering. This is basically where it's showing the same content as this. I don't remember what they call that cool little thing. So it's just a different type of box that kind of shows, you know, here's 1 year and all the different things broke out. So there again, I can just hover over it and see a value. And then these are all the estimates that actually made up that data. So the thing that's really brilliant about whatever Microsoft is doing for this product is if I click on something, all that other stuff changes. So if I say, well, I'm looking for my estimates for 2019, and I click on that, this is now filtered to show me, it looks like I've primarily been successful in, you know, hotels or offices. Here's where this has actually changed. Here's where this list has changed. I don't know why my map isn't working at the moment. I wonder if I need an internet access. So believe it or not, in that corner should be a map that shows me where in the United States those projects actually are. So that way you can actually click on the map and it will also back do all the other charts. So I can say, oh, show me all the jobs in Missouri, show me all the jobs in Kansas, or something of that nature. So I don't know what I've done to mess that one up at the moment. And then as I click on any one of them, so if I wanted to see, well, what made up these offices here? So you notice that that was just 2019. These were the ones, this dollar amount so small that, you know, it's one section here, one section over here. But it's a very powerful way that it seems like more and more people are trying to analyze data. You know, where's our better hit ratios? Where's our success been? Are we doing better on doing hotel work or hospital work this year or something of that nature? So we're trying to find, you know, different ways of tracking this data. And that's been one of the biggest eye-openers that I've had, you know, since we moved this environment to, you know, a need for a product that most clients own as part of your Microsoft Office product that allows you to do these type of things. Now, the other thing about BI that I'm not very good at is there's also ways that we can actually publish those to push them up to websites, phones, things of that nature, so other people can query that data without having to actually have access to, you know, my estimating product or the accounting product or whatever you're linking this thing up to. So it's something that has got to be an neat little change. One of the advanced ones that I'm currently trying to do that hasn't went well yet, one of the visions that I would like to be able to do is I'd like to be able to see all my different projects by type, so I can click on a type and actually open those estimates up and show me the cost per square foot for all my group phases or phases, so that way I can tell some sort of a track history by year for different types of work and what the cost per square foot for, you know, electrical work over 1 year versus another has been, some of those type of things. And so far it's plausible, but how Sage stores their numbers, I'm having trouble getting all the math. But so far it's pretty doable. So just kind of a little tease there that, you know, it's something that a lot of computerized estimating systems, you know, you can link that type of thing up with it, and as long as you can understand your data and where data is at, it's real nice how they've kind of done these little block graphs and allows you to customize a nice looking, very informative dashboard thing without having to know much. So even as I'm clicking on these different things, you'll see, you know, there that contract's been changed, what the count has been changed, you know, all of that with a matter of just a pretty good ability of just basically clicking on something and having it update all the rest of the information, you know, based on those numbers. So,
A quick question when you're talking about what you can pull from Sage or not. The WBS structure that you can, you know, kind of create what
Sure.
you need.
huh?
Can it read those?
Definitely not. Yes. So, anything that you have in that Sage, let me rephrase that. If you're on at least a single version, yes. The old pervasive version, no. Because of all the estimates being separate files. But as long as it's pervasive, or the single version, it's all in one table. So every item has all your 40 different WBS codes all in that one item. So whatever combination you're using, it's all accessible. At this point, let me kind of get a rough idea of where people feel they are in the office or in the group here. Two ways I'd like to see kind of heading here a little bit. One of them is who would like to see building something like this, you know, I'm not going to do much, but maybe building something like this out where I could actually tap into the data, grab some of these widgets and drop on there and things of that nature? Or are there things that within the estimating aspect or the e-takeoff aspect that would be more beneficial for you guys? Who would like to see more with the Power BI? Couple? Okay. What about something with estimating, where we're looking more in the spreadsheet, more in assemblies, or something of that nature, spreadsheet layouts? One. And what about e-takeoff? You're going to make it difficult. I think it was 2, 2, and 1.
So, I guess one question on whether it is that's a broader issue back to what you were talking about at the beginning, that you guys don't just cover estimating systems. So a lot of times, I think you could leverage this pretty easily to see, like you said, if you can get the square foot metrics or particular metrics to pull out, you know what you were proposing at. You may even be able to see, okay, when I'm at X square foot on electrical, my wins have been in this range, my losses has been in this range.
Sure.
The issue that I've seen more of is how do you actually get historicals then that you can leverage with your estimate.
As far as actuals,
Actuals out of,
like your accounting system, or, yeah.
if your accounting system has the right cost structure, you've got a reasonable map for your database.
Yeah, so I think that's where you're almost going to have to figure out what makes more sense. Because, you know, with something like how these grids work in data, you know, that would be very easy to tap right into the, you know, an accounting system or something of that nature and pull the same type of things out using actual cost. The only drawback that I think that I know I'm working with one client on trying to do some BI stuff with, and we're kind of facing that challenge right now because his comment is he'd love to know every item in his estimate, what that history has been, but unfortunately the way we're lumping so much stuff together in the accounting, I can't give it to him. Because right now it's like, okay, I've got these 5 items, they all roll up to one cost code, so yeah, my cost is at this level for just one line, but the detail we'd like to see is at the 5, you know, different levels and things of that nature. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge in it is trying to figure out, you know, what side makes more sense or how much detail I really need to see. Because on the estimating aspect, if I really need the detail of all the items and I'm not tracking that much in accounting, I'm almost going to have to go off of, you know, whatever I have for those estimates and something of that nature. Yeah, unless I was to do it more, you know, hey, the cost codes are good, or just by, you know, major group phases or something like that, so we can roll up that cost or something like that, you know, that would make some sense possibly.
Can you take the stage software, cost goes down, down to the accounting?
Yeah. So that's one of the biggest advantages and sages on both sides. You know, a lot of the time the accounting and the estimate and so forth is you can actually sort your estimate by cost codes, and like how I did that drag and drop and move to a different, that can be moved to a different cost code before I send it over. Because there's a lot of clients that like to go through there and adjust the cost code before they go over it. So like one client I work with, they do a lot of paving, where on a large job they do paving and striping for 2 separate cost codes. On a small job, they just go ahead and grab the item, sling it together, because they just lump it together for paving, because they don't want to keep track of striping on something that small. The other thing that they've added recently is they've added with the newer SQL version is the ability that when I send it to accounting, it now also allows me to create cost codes on the fly for that one job only. So I've got some clients that need special equipment or some special things that I do want a separate cost code for that in job cost. And instead of having to transfer it over, get rejected, someone having to jump through a bunch of hoops at the accounting to get it fixed, I can now say, oh, it's going to come up with an error saying, hey, that cost code doesn't exist. And I can say, that's fine, add it, here's a description of what it should have. And it will create that just for that one job in job cost. Let's see. Since I've got my machine hooked up, I'm going to just kind of show a little bit with this. So with this, the biggest thing is, you know, this is a blank BI screen. So if I go up to get data, this is probably the biggest challenge is knowing, you know, whatever product you're trying to pull it from, enough to, you know, where to get the data and things of that nature. So in my case, our estimating is running on a SQL server. So then I can tell it basically what my server name and instance is, which I take a look here. Okay, so then that's going to pull up all my different tables that there's data, or databases that there's data in. So in my case, we've got one database for wherever our database is at, one database for all our estimates are stored, things of that nature, where each one's kind of separated. So
people in Glasgow?
So if I open up my estimate table, this will actually show me a list of some of the different content. So if I wanted to do something with, you know, cover page, project information, you know, something of that nature, I basically just pick what tables have data in it that I want to utilize, and that will actually pull that data into this little model thing that I can kind of review before I do it, make some changes or things like that. So if I just go ahead and hit load, what it's going to do then is on the right-hand side, I'm going to see all the different tables that I ended up selecting. And it takes a little bit because it's actually going to take it out of Sage and move that to their here. So now it's trying to detect the relationship between those two tables, and somewhere over here on the right. So over here is a list of those two tables that I picked. Over here is all those little, I don't remember what they call them, you know, little widget type things that are all the different types of charts or lists or things like that that I could possibly put out there and so forth. So, for example, this one here stands for just like a chart and stuff. So I could actually drop it out there. And that's going to basically give me an empty object that I can then tell it what I want to drop into it. So if I want to go ahead and then open up my tables here and say, well, I want to take a look at let's say I want maybe I can use this and just search and find it. So I want to see what types of projects these are, so I'm going to drop that out there. And maybe I want to see what state these are in, so those are two different tables, it'll kind of figure it out. So then it kind of breaks it out into more detail. So as you see, that just starts to grow, but that's already taking a combination of all the different estimates and what project types or things like that. If I go ahead and say, let's get into more details. Right now it's kind of grouping, so that way it's only showing you a handful. So let's go ahead and say that I want to put my
For those of you too that ever do have to interview for jobs, this is a great sales tool to have in your arsenal as well, because I was once on the marketing side of a construction company and I had to, present graphical information to people in booklets and on screens, and a tool like this saves your graphics team a ton of time. This is creating the graphics for you for the kinds of data that you want to show your potential clients about you and your company and the types of jobs that you've done, things like that.
So basically, there's just a list of, every project with those different, columns I put out. So if I go ahead and say that I want to do a little slicer, it drops another little object out there. So I can go ahead and say that maybe I want to make an object that has my project class in it by itself. So it's going to go through and figure out, okay, there's all the different project types I have. So this is the part that's just amazing about it, because I can go through here already and say, oh, I want hotels, and that automatically filters that left-hand table by hotels without me having to write a bunch of code or anything to do it somehow. So that's the part that really I thought was ingenious about however they've set this little, objects up and things like that, because it makes it where, you know, pretty easy to sit there and change stuff around and say, oh, there's all my offices or something of that nature, without having to get into a bunch of, you know, I've dealt with other report writers and stuff like that just doing something that simple is a challenge, or if this or that, and graded interests and things like that, it's kind of nice how they can filter that out. And if I go ahead and grab this object and make it smaller, and say that I want to put another slicer in there, maybe in that slicer, I'm going to go ahead and put the state in here. So same type of thing. So now I can sit there and say, well, I want just the jobs in Kansas. So it's already filtered out this class by all my jobs in Kansas and just the ones that are hotels. So now it's using both those little charts to somehow filter together the list. So when you start talking about data mining, trying to go back and find other jobs that match this job or something like that, that's just a very cool way of visually, you know, to just make it where, shit, anyone can click, as long as you can click on what you want, bang, here's the results of what you get. I think that put me real close to the time. So any last questions, comments, thoughts before we wrap her up?
Thanks for your time today. If anybody want to see more of any of these products, just let us know. I have cards out there too. Happy to help anytime, any questions, things like that.
Make sure you get your card in there.
Yes,